What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm joined by two of the best in the business. Chris Fedor, fresh out of the Kia Center, where Orlando forced a Game 7 against the Cavs, and me and Jimmy are in Cleveland holding it down. But, Chris, I just want to get your instant reaction to the fans and the atmosphere of Game 6 in the Kia Center. We'll get into the stats in the game itself, but I just want to get a feel for the arena.
It was good, man. It was a good environment. It was a playoff environment. Magic fans understood what was at stake. Magic fans understood how to try and propel their team forward. You know, Jamal Mosley, the coach of the Magic, talked after the game just about the environment. And I definitely think that the Magic being a young team certainly seems to fuel off of that crowd. If you think about it, they went 29-12 at home during the regular season. They're now 32-12 overall at Kia Center. During the regular season, their offensive rating was boosted by 5 points per 100 possessions at the Kia Center. Their role players certainly play better at home than they do on the road. You saw Cole Anthony make some big plays. You saw Markelle Fultz make some timely buckets, especially in the fourth quarter. So I do think it was a good, rowdy playoff environment. And, you know, our seats inside the Kia Center, they're rare in today's day and age. You know, every arena puts the media in different places. Sometimes you're at center court in a perch. Sometimes you're in what they call a vomitory above the tunnel that leads to the court a little bit higher up. In Madison Square Garden, you're basically in the rafters. So it varies based on the arena that you're in. Inside the Kia Center, the media is on the baseline. It is along the baseline behind about 5 rows of expensive seats. For the final 5 minutes of tonight's game, I had to stand up the whole time because everybody in that arena was standing up basically for the final 5 minutes of the game because they were so into it. It was a very competitive fourth quarter. The way that the Magic were playing in the fourth quarter obviously created a little bit of a jolt throughout the arena. So I do think, look, it's not Oracle Arena for the NBA Finals. It's not Scotiabank in Toronto. It certainly was not MSG the way that it was last year, which was one of the most hostile environments I've ever been a part of since covering the NBA. But it was a good, lively playoff environment, and you could tell that they've embraced this young team, and this young team feeds off of their energy for sure.
Well, that's insane that you had to stand up for the final minutes of the game.
The final 5 minutes, basically. And like every time anything of note happened, I had to sit back down and type it on my running game log so that I could get the gamer up. So it was cool to see that, though. I'll say that. It wasn't great, obviously, from my perspective. Nobody cares about me, though, and how much it made it more difficult to do my gamer on time, but it was really, really cool to see a crowd that into the game. They understood the magnitude of this one for sure.
We care, Chris. We care about how that makes you feel and how hard it is to do our job.
When we send that in for contests, we got to make sure that that's in the intro.
That's right.
We're grading this on degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
Degree of difficulty game story. Is that a category? Anyway, I think we got to get to the game, but also the elephant in the room, which was Donovan Mitchell's performance. Like, the man had 50 points. That's the second highest playoff performance behind LeBron James. And I want to just stat you down because there are some incredible stats that Donovan was able to achieve in tonight's game, including the fourth quarter, which is where I'm going to start. NBA players to score their team's final 20-plus points in a playoff game in the last 20 years. I guess you could know who this is, Chris, because you might have been there.
I was there. It was LeBron.
Exactly. LeBron James, 2007 Eastern Conference Finals, Game 5. He had the last 25 points. Donovan Mitchell had the last 22. So that goes back before the fourth quarter when the Cavs had 18 points in the fourth quarter, which Donovan Mitchell scored all of those points. And here's another one. Donovan Mitchell surpassed Kobe Bryant for most points in the paint by a guard in a playoff game in the last 25 years. He had 36 points in the paint. He's a guard.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane to think about what he was able to accomplish. And then the other side of that coin, it wasn't enough. and he's also doing it on one knee, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Can I add another stat to your thing?
Do it.
So, Donovan's 50 points are tied for the second most in a loss in a potential series clincher in NBA history. And Donovan is the first player ever in NBA postseason history. Postseason history. That's a long time to have multiple 50-point road losses.
Oh my God.
Isn't that a tough pill for him to swallow? Like, are you kidding me?
I was watching the post-game presser.
Imagine what he was thinking.
I mean, I was watching the post-game presser, and like the face that he made when Joe Varden from The Athletic asked,
"Yep,
what was going through your mind when you look at the stat sheet, say I have 50 and know that it wasn't enough?" He said,
And he said, "I was going to give you a sarcastic answer, but I'll answer it honestly instead."
So let's start there. Let's talk about one, Donovan's performance, but two, what went wrong for almost everybody else. And I want to say Darius Garland played 3 good quarters of basketball and then did a Darius Garland thing and did not play well in the fourth. So, Jimmy, let's start with you. What did you think about Donovan Mitchell's performance tonight and then everybody else?
I mean, I think Donovan gave us the full stop, bona fide superstar performance that we've been asking for, that he played to the standard at which he holds himself. And it still wasn't enough, which are two problematic realities to square right now. Because you could sense from kind of the beginning, the way he came out, once he realized he had it, he felt like they were going to close it out tonight. They went for it, I guess is I'll say. He went for it. The Cavs went for it. He pushed through a knee that he went to the back again tonight during the middle of the game. We know the knee is not 100%. It's not getting better. Whatever the percentage was at the start of this game, it's lower now, and it probably will be lower on Sunday as a result of all the stress that Donovan put on it tonight. Donovan and Darius started the fourth quarter. Did they play the entire fourth quarter, both of them?
They did.
That's a sign from the Cavs side. We're going for it. We think we can take this here. And to expend all that energy, to put all that stress on his knee and still have to go back for a Game 7 on Sunday, I am worried in the small picture about what he's going to have left for Sunday. Sincerely. I would love to know how he's going to wake up feeling tomorrow. I would love to know how he felt walking out of that arena tonight. I'm really worried about this game on Sunday because of what Donovan just spent mentally and physically. Obviously the knee is what it is, and he was doing a lot of cutting and stepping hard on the knee to get to the rim, right? But also the focus it takes to be that good for 4 quarters, and then the drain that it must, like you said in the press conference after, you can kind of see it a little bit, but the drain that it must take on your spirit to have that kind of game and still not be able to take it. I just don't know how they're going to need it again. I mean, they showed it. The Cavs showed us tonight. They might. It's very possible they're going to need that Donovan Mitchell or something close to it again to close this series out. And I don't know about that in the small picture. Big picture. This entire season, these last 2 seasons, have been about the Cavs trying to prove to Donovan Mitchell, we can support you during your prime years. We can give you a co-star, a running mate in Darius Garland, who won't make you have to do this stuff all the time. Oops, Darius Garland scored 0 points in the fourth quarter. Part of that is Donovan just had it going. So, like,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, like, you don't need Darius to do too much when Donovan's got going like that. But when he did take his turn running the show, wasn't great. Missed a couple gimmies on drives to the rim. But so tonight, it's a little middling ground there, right? Because Darius passed the test at various points. He was really good for the last 2 games at moments. And then we're still leaving a little bit to be desired. And then the rest of the core around him. Sorry, Chris, I'll wrap up here.
You're good.
The rest of the core around him, it's just flat not good enough. And I know that part of that is Jared Allen's hurt, and Evan Mobley turned his ankle tonight. But other than Max Strus, who has had a nice little shooting resurgence these last couple games, like, who are you pointing to and saying that that's a role player that you can trust to be this person? Not even like perform outside of the role, which would be great. It'd be great if Karis LeVert could be the super sub-6 man that the Cavs paid him to be, instead of getting a DNP in the second half tonight. That'd be great. But I'm just talking about pointing to someone, you know what you're getting game to game from that guy. Where are they at? And those cards can be shuffled a little bit, right? Like, Kobe Altman can go to Donovan and say, well, okay, we'll get this guy out of here. We'll move. Those are just the important part is that Donovan trusts Evan, Darius, and Jared. Which, okay, we can have an open conversation about that. The rest of the part, Kobe can change, right? I guess. we kind of harped during their cap situation, but that's what he'll say. It's just like, you kind of already did that a little bit last summer. These are the guys you brought to me. Strus, good now, not great at the beginning of the series. George Niang, I got questions about why he played tonight. And the other guys, I don't know. I don't know what you want me to say. So, small picture, I'm worried about Donovan Sunday. Cap Sunday. Big picture, I'm worried about the summer.
I think the Magic are approaching this and saying, essentially, 1, Donovan, you can't beat us on your own. And 2, Donovan and Darius, you guys can't beat us together. And I think they're trying to make things extremely difficult on Evan Mobley, Marcus Morris Sr., Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, George Niang, Karis LeVert, and everybody else. And I thought this was a really interesting quote from Magic coach Jamal Mosley after the game. He said Donovan was going, but the other guys didn't have it going as much. No one overreacted to Donovan. He's a special, special player. To be able to have 50 and only make 3 threes, that's very special. But our ability not to overreact or panic to what was happening because we continued to share it, move it, trust each other. See, like, sometimes in the NBA, when a guy just is cooking, a team starts overhelping, right? Or they start trying to do things on their own, or they change up their rotations or something because they say, man, Donovan's killing us. The Magic are banking on the fact that Donovan can't do it on his own. The Magic are banking on the fact that Donovan and Darius together can't outscore the entire collection of Orlando players. And going into Game 7, I think the Cavs are going to have to try, if they can, to change up their approach and see if they can get something from Max Strus that's a little bit more consistent. See if they can get some more consistency off their bench and things like that. Because Orlando is so adamant on trying to make things so difficult on the other guys, and staying home on shooters and not collapsing to the paint when Donovan is driving in there and Darius is driving in there and saying, if you're going to make these acrobatic whirling finishes at the rim, we're just going to tip our cap, but we're not going to crash. We're not going to bring extra help. We're not going to bring somebody from the weak side. The Cavs scored 66 points in the paint. Donovan was able to get in there. Darius was able to get in there. They were able to finish some at the rim, some really, really difficult ones. But Orlando, for the most part, was staying home on the shooters. And the Cavs, once again, had a game tonight with under 33-point shots. In a way, the Magic defensive scheme and the way that they've approached this series has um, in a roundabout way, like, not allowed Cleveland to play to its true identity on the offensive end of the floor, or the identity that it wants to. And beyond that, like, here's the other thing, guys, and I was having a conversation with somebody as I was walking out of the arena with this. Donovan Mitchell, we all admit, has been great in this series. There's been a couple of games where, he hasn't lived up to the star standard. He hasn't met his own expectations. But Donovan's been good. Jared Allen has been good when he's been out there. First 4 games, he was dominant. He was a force inside. Beyond those two, who has had a good series?
Nobody.
I would have said Evan before tonight, and
Yeah, in
that's
spurts.
kind of the ankle.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure. In
but
spurts, I think
offensively,
Evan's been good.
especially if we're talking offensively, yeah, it's hit or miss.
Yeah. I mean, defensively, he's been a game-wrecking unicorn. He had 5 blocks again tonight on one ankle, basically. And look, Darius has had spurts first 3 quarters tonight. Obviously, the last game. But, like, when you have 8 guys in your rotation, 9 guys in your rotation, and you're through 6 games in this series, and you say 2 of them have played well or to their standard, that's a problem. And the series isn't over. The Cavs could easily win Game 7, but through 6 games, to have like 2 guys playing consistently well, man, that's tough.
It's not just sorry, Ethan. It's not just that 2 of them are playing well. Like JB, like 6 games in, JB's kind of still searching for the right mix of guys, right? Like Niang out of the lineup, Game 5.
Yeah.
Well, let's try him again because Karis LeVert is unplayable right now. 8 minutes tonight. He has 37 points total in the series in 6 games.
I know.
And he was one of the few who were pretty good last year in the Knicks series. He averaged like 15 a game.
Right.
And he took all these strides during when Donovan and Darius were out. He was so good as a playmaker. It should have been a concept changer. That's the kind of guy, the Karis LeVert archetype that we saw during the season, is the kind of guy where if the Magic are playing this defense where they're trying to basically let Donovan Mitchell score 50, Karis LeVert is a guy who can shake that up. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but like that's what happened essentially. Karis LeVert's a guy who can shake that up. Secondary creation,
Right.
Even tertiary creation can really shake that strategy up a little bit. But it's just Donovan. It's sometimes Darius. And then we're shrugging our shoulders 6 games into a playoff series. That's not good.
I mean, to put that into numbers, because I think we skipped over this one glaring stat because we were trying to be more intricate and get more in depth into it. Donovan Mitchell scored 50 points. The rest of the Cavs scored 46.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. Like, that's not good enough.
Donovan and Darius scored 71. The rest of them scored 25.
Right. Like, the numbers speak for themselves on what we're discussing with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and Darius Garland being skeptical in his fourth quarters because he had 3 turnovers in the fourth quarter. Like, that can't happen, especially in a tight game, especially when you have a lead going into the final frame. Like, that is something that we have looked at for Darius Garland this entire season. How is he going to grow in fourth quarter opportunities because he continued to get them during the regular season when a lot of people, fans included, were trying to figure out would JB Bickerstaff bench him if it came to the point that Darius was not going to get productive minutes in the fourth quarter. Yes, it was a crazy concept because of confidence and what Darius Garland means to the team.
Again, look what everybody else did today. Who's taking those minutes? Come on now.
Sure.
So that's the interesting part about it is like we really have to go and figure out who can the Cavs look to? I was
Right.
reading our subtext channel, and there somebody literally said, "Did Karis LeVert get abducted by aliens?" And like at this point, it's not too crazy of a concept because this is a completely different player. Like you said, Jimmy, he had 2 turnovers in the lackluster minutes that he played in today's game, and it just did not feel like this entire series he's been able to be what he was in the regular season at all. So, and we will get to the point that I think everybody's making or questioning about why George Niang saw the court tonight, because one, he wasn't hitting shots. He hit 1 3-pointer, and then he was abysmal, if not worse, on the defensive end. Like, I keep seeing clips of George Niang like playing defense and like making horrendous attempts at blocking shots or getting broken down defensively, and it this is all to say the Cavs, and this isn't an excuse at this point, Evan Mobley was hurt for a period of time in today's game. Jared Allen is out. Dean Wade is unavailable. Marcus Morris Sr. can't play 40 plus minutes at his age. Like,
No.
So,
And he shouldn't. Like, on a team with legitimate aspirations, Marcus Morris Sr. shouldn't be playing like that.
Again, to the point about we're searching here, Marcus Morris shows a flash of life in Game 5. Oh, we got to start him. We got to start him. Let's take Isaac out of the starting lineup. I understand.
Well,
I understand. Go ahead, Chris.
I think that's different just because of size purposes. Like, they went 3 6'10" guys.
I think the Cavs knew the situation with Gary Harris. I think they knew that Jamal Mosley was going to put Jonathan Isaac in the starting lineup. And I think their counter to that, their reaction to that, was we need more size to match. The Magic started 4 guys, 6'10" or above. Everybody in their starting lineup was at least 6'5" because Jalen Suggs was the point guard. That is one of the biggest starting lineups I've ever seen in my entire life. It's got to be one of the biggest starting lineups in NBA history. And I just don't think the Cavs wanted to roll out 3 different guys 6'5" or below. Isaac Okoro, I mean, it would have made that difficult. It also would have made it difficult for the Cavs to switch things on defense. You know, there's more switchability with somebody like Marcus Morris Sr.
Can I ask this? If Isaac Okoro played really well, however you define that, let's say he scored like 8 to 10 points in both of the road games, first 2 road games in Orlando, and he played great defense as he usually does, do you think that decision still gets made?
Based on size, I would say yes.
He wasn't starting in those games, but he started Game 5.
But he didn't play well in those games.
That's why.
I also think Isaac going 2 for 10 in Game 5 probably played a little bit into that as well.
Right.
So
that's what I'm saying.
I think it was a combination of Marcus Morris Sr. Yeah, he played well in Game 5, so part of it was that. But I think the other part of it was Jonathan Isaac going in the starting lineup required the Cavs in a way to play with a little bit more size.
Fair.
I just completely forgot Franz Wagner was 6'10". I was looking at the forwards and the centers, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. All of them are 6'10", and then you throw Franz Wagner at the 2, and it's like, that's just ridiculous. Like,
and look, the Cavs capitalized on that. They capitalized on the fact that Jonathan Isaac could not keep up in terms of lateral quickness, in terms of quickness overall. He couldn't keep up with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Like, that was a lot to ask Jonathan Isaac, who is a power forward by nature, to guard Donovan Mitchell off the ball, Darius Garland off the ball, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell in one-on-one situations. He's got the length, he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, but he certainly doesn't have the foot speed. And the Cavs capitalized on that. And I think part of the reason why Darius and Donovan were able to get to the basket the way that they were is because, you know, the perimeter defense for the Magic lacked a little bit without Gary Harris, a natural guard, being out there checking one of those guys. I mean, Franz Wagner wasn't going to stay in front of Donovan Mitchell. He wasn't going to stay in front of Darius Garland. Guys are too quick, too crafty, too shifty. So the Cavs capitalized on that, but there were other areas, obviously, where the size of the Magic hurt the Cavs too. So there's a give and take with these kinds of lineup decisions for sure.
All right. So I don't want to get too much into previewing Game 7.
No, we're not previewing Game 7.
I hear
What are
you.
doing?
I hear you. I'm talking about the possibility of Jared Allen returning for Game 7. Because I feel like that's important for this conversation. Because we keep talking about the fact that almost nobody on the Cavs right now is reliable on a game-to-game basis. The player that JB Bickerstaff said during the season had the most dependability was Jared Allen because of all the injuries that have happened throughout the season and everything else that Jared Allen brings on the court on a nightly basis. Chris, you were with Jared Allen today at shoot around and got to see him maybe after the game if he was in the locker room. Do you push it? If it's Game 7.
Right. I understand what you're saying, and I understand what people are going to say. It's Game 7. Throw everything that you have out there. But we've talked about this so many different times on this podcast. There is a difference between being healthy and being effective. Did you guys watch any of the Milwaukee-Indiana series?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Did you watch any of the game the other night?
Yeah.
Yes.
The closeout game? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Damian Lillard comes back. Was he a positive
No.
for the Bucks? No, he
No.
wasn't because he was limited. And they kept picking on him, and he wasn't making shots, and he disrupted their flow that they had built. And they didn't have great chemistry on the offensive end of the floor. So all I'm saying is, like, it's very, very easy to say, well, just throw this guy out there, even if he's limited, even if he can't be as effective. It's got to be better than what you can get from Tristan Thompson. It's got to be better than what you can get from Evan Mobley if he's less than 100% because he was limping around the locker room after the game. But it doesn't always work that way. Like, sometimes a guy is limited and he can't be as effective. And it can be a negative for the team to have him out there. And I'm not saying that Jarrett definitely would be, but it's something that JV Bickerstaff and this organization would have to weigh. It's something that Jarrett would have to continue to weigh. I'm told that he is having a very difficult time raising his arm up without feeling any kind of pain. Jared Allen needs to do that to rebound the basketball, right? Jared Allen needs to do that to block shots,
yes,
to protect the paint, to do some of the things that make him such an impactful player for this team. And if he can't do those things, I don't know if he can help the Cavs as much as people would want him to, as much as the Cavs would want him to. So I'm told that Jarrett is doing everything that he can do to try and get himself right, to try and fight through this and play. But it's very, very difficult. It's very limiting. And I think JB also talked about it before the game. He said, we've got to keep him safe and protected. And I'm told that he took an initial shot in game 1 to the rib area. And the Cavs just kind of looked at it, and Jarrett kind of looked at it and said, okay, that's playoff basketball. There's a level of physicality. But then he took a shot in game 4 from Franz Wagner to the same exact spot that made it worse. If it were to happen early on in game 7 to the same exact spot for a third time, that goes from a bruised rib to a cracked rib to a broken rib, however you want to phrase it, and he's done for the remainder of the playoffs. That's something that has to be considered as well. His safety.
It's not just, okay, so it's game 7. Well, this was game 6. Like, they're
Right,
both important games.
Too.
They're
There's
both
some
important
urgency here.
games, and this guy wants to play. Ethan and I talked about this on the pod yesterday. Like, Jared Allen has established himself as a tough dude. He's played in 81 straight games before this. He's played in 60 games in 6 of the 8 seasons that he's played in the NBA. Like, if he can't play in Game 6, I believe him. I believe him when he says that his ribs are hurting. And if, again, to Chris's point, if he can't raise his arm, yeah, man, that's being a big man. And now that you're on the injury report, do you think we'll talk about Franz Wagner? Mo Wagner? Mo Wagner is letting you know he's checking in on those ribs immediately. That's the first thing he's doing when he comes into the game. So, yeah, the safety is an issue. The functionality is an issue. But that Jared Allen's toughness is not an issue. We know who this guy is.
Thank you, Jimmy, because I know we were going to talk about I knew we were going to hear about the label of softness because Jared Allen has a bruised rib and is going to play.
Like the only guy who's beating the Knicks allegations from last year. Him and Mobley a little bit. And Mitchell we knew, though, you know? Everyone, like, come on. We don't need to do this again.
All right. So I think we need to bring it back to Game 6 just for a second and discuss Darius Garland, because there's positives and negatives that can be taken from Game 6. I mean, obviously in Game 5, he made stretches and took a shot-first mentality, which he kind of carried over to Game 6. Started using his twitchiness, his change of speed to get to the paint and things of that nature. But then again in the fourth quarter, like we've said before on this podcast, earlier in today's podcast, he struggled. Wasn't able to score, turned the ball over, was sloppy. Chris, what is your sense of Darius Garland right now, and what's been going on with him, and if he's moving in a positive direction or if he's regressing?
He only took one shot in the fourth quarter. So I think part of it was Darius kind of recognizing the situation, understanding that Donovan Mitchell had an advantageous matchup, understanding that Donovan was having one of the best games in playoff history of this franchise, understanding that Donovan had it rolling to a level of, as the point guard, I'm going to continue to read the game and understand what may be best for this team. I had more of a problem with the way that the offense functioned in general. I just felt like too many guys deferred to Donovan. Not just Darius. I think it was everybody else. It was a lot of guys standing around and watching. And no, they didn't just stand around. Obviously, they were trying some actions. They were moving around. They were trying to create stuff off the ball. The Magic, they deserve credit for the defense and taking the Cavs out of those actions and making it so that after a switch, the Cavs would get a little bit more stagnant. So, I mean, the more alarming thing when it comes to Darius specifically is not that he didn't score or only took one shot in the quarter. I think that was a byproduct of certain circumstances. The more alarming thing is the 3 turnovers. The Cavs had 8 turnovers in the fourth quarter. They gave up 5 offensive rebounds. 8 turnovers in one quarter, just, that sabotages the offense. You don't even get a shot. So for Darius to have 3 of those turnovers and the kinds of turnovers that they were, that's the most perplexing and frustrating part, I think. The 8-second call is just ridiculous. Like, this is Game 6. How do you not get the ball across half court in a situation like that? End of game situation, late in the game. You just have to have more value of those possessions. And I know that I've said this so many different times on the podcast, but it bears repeating. And I think people saw it tonight with the Cavs. There is an overall lack of readiness when it comes to this roster from some of its most important players when it comes to playoff basketball. And I think in many ways that was highlighted by what happened in the fourth quarter. Darius, by the way, also fell asleep completely on what should have been a box out of Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony is like 6'2", and after Orlando missed a 3, Cole Anthony came crashing from the corner, untouched, because Darius was just on another planet, I think. And Cole Anthony got a timely putback that was really, really important. That was a defensive stop that should have been finished with a rebound. That wasn't Banchero getting an offensive rebound. That wasn't Franz Wagner getting an offensive rebound. That wasn't freaking Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks last year or Julius Randle. That was attention to detail. That was focus. That needs to be heightened in late game situations. And you're still just not seeing enough of it from Darius. You're just not. And that goes to other guys on this roster too, but we're specifically talking about Darius. And those kinds of things cost you games on the road.
So, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Cole Anthony thing, Chris, because that dude's a paperweight, and
Right.
wouldn't say he is exactly known for mixing it up down low. So that's egregious. The turnovers, like you said, egregious. The 8-second call, and I think the one I want to highlight the one where along the sideline, where I think he was trying to on the right wing. I think they were, and he kind of just like panic passed it. I want to say it was Strus standing over there. I don't remember exactly who it was, but it was late-ish clock situation, and Darius was driving, and his plan changed. I think he thought he was getting to the rim, and then maybe there was someone there that he didn't see or something, and he just kind of like vomited the ball up, like the kids do with March Madness. Every time the clock hits below 2 minutes, they just forget everything they've learned about basketball. It looked like that. And that's just like that. That's the worst thing you can do. It's worse than it's still bad that he only took one shot in the fourth quarter, but it's way worse. It's your job to, if you're not gonna join in on the fun with Donovan Mitchell's NBA Jam party, it is at least your job to be the caretaker of possession and get a good look for someone else, right? Like that's what the Cavs are trying to tell us after Game 5. Why doesn't Darius Garland have these more aggressive streaks more often? Well, because he wants to get everyone involved. They're talking like he's, Steve Nash, true point guard kind of stuff. True point guards don't make those kind of plays. They're aware of time and situation at all times. They know they have a pulse, so they don't lose, true point guard, they don't lose track of the tiniest player on the floor when it's time to box out an important rebound. They don't panic and throw the ball out of bounds like that. And again, I agree that, when Donovan has it going, it can be hard for Darius to get in a rhythm. But, like, that's part of what we're trying to prove to Donovan, too, man. Like,
yeah,
we have had 2 years. Okay, granted, 1+ years, because this year's been really weird with both of their availability. But you had all of last year to try to sort this stuff out. And I actually thought at points during last year that they were doing a pretty good job sharing the driving wheel at times. But this is what it is to play with another star. Mm-hmm. There will be times where he's just got it going, and you have to let that happen. And then in the middle of him having it going, he's going to say, oh, crap, I don't have it. Can you do something with this? And then you got to do it. That is the beauty of the LeBron-Kyrie relationship. Kyrie just knew in an instant, like LeBron would give up on a possession for himself, and Kyrie could just do it. He was uniquely, I think that's a unique talent to just snap into a rhythm like that. And you can see it how well it's working with him and Luka. Luka's a very similar player to LeBron, how ball dominant he is. But like, if this is going to work, if Donovan Mitchell's going to stick around, if you guys are going to compete for championships, I kind of don't care that Donovan has it going and it's hard for you to get a rhythm right now. Like, that's what playing next to another really good player is like.
Here's another stat for you. Even with Darius Garland not scoring in the fourth quarter, Donovan and Darius still combined to be the highest scoring backcourt in playoff franchise history for the Cavs in tonight's game. So, yes, and what I was saying earlier, Chris, obviously the turnovers were more impactful than him not taking shots. Obviously, bad and worse is the situation there. But I think I wanted to end the podcast with this, because I know Bickerstaff and Donovan Mitchell can't complain about foul calls or anything like that because they don't want to get fined. But 66 points in the paint, just 10 attempts at the free throw line, opposed to 26 attempts at the free throw line for the Orlando Magic. Chris, what were you seeing on the court? Was it more so the Orlando Magic was getting away with calls, or the physicality was being matched and the Cavs were just complaining too much about not receiving calls?
I don't think this was a situation where the Cavs were wrong in their complaints. JB talked about it in his post game. Donovan talked about it. Other players in the locker room were talking about it as well. I do think it was a whistle that was more favorable to Orlando. And I do think a team that is willing to repeatedly attack the paint and draw contacts and try and play through contacts and be the aggressor and all those different things. I do think at some point that team should be more rewarded. And I don't feel like the Cavs were. I do think there were moments throughout the course of the game where fouls were called against Orlando that shouldn't have been called, and there were fouls called against the Cavs that shouldn't have been called, and there were no calls both ways. But I just did not feel like in tonight's game specifically that there was a level of consistency with the reward for one team doing a certain thing compared to the other team. That was just my feel for it.
And Jimmy, before I let you talk about this, because I know you have a take on it as well, Franz Wagner took more free throws alone than the entire Cavs team. He was 11 for 11 from the line tonight. Jimmy, go ahead. Give us what you got.
Okay, so this is kind of a passion project of mine. If you're going to complain about foul calls, fine. That's I get that you got to play your game in the public eye. The reason they do this is because they think they can influence it legitimately. And if you believe that, more power to you. But if we're I'm trying to find the line between, are you just doing this to get a better whistle, or do you actually think you have an axe to grind? Because if you actually think you have an axe to grind, I need you to send a clip to the league office, and I need to see the fouls that you think. Yeah, and I need to see the fouls that you think were fouls that weren't called, because Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, who, let's be honest, were doing the majority of the attacking the rim tonight. Darius Garland averages 3.1 free throw attempts for his career. So tonight, Darius Garland shot 0 free throw attempts. Okay, there's maybe 3 free throw attempts missing there. Donovan Mitchell shoots 5 free throw attempts for his career. He shot 6 tonight. Now, I understand this was a very different Donovan. You can't just play the averages with Donovan Mitchell tonight. Probably a few more free throws there. But, probably gonna be a disparity when you only got 2 guys who are going. And I would say, as we just, the numbers bear it out, Darius Garland, I wouldn't call him a guy who seeks out contact when he goes to the rim. And perhaps Donovan Mitchell, on a bad knee, a little less likely to seek out contact. He was finishing with more floaters than he might otherwise finish with tonight. I think that's fair to say. And the rest of the guys just aren't putting pressure on the rim. I do think you could make a legitimate case that the Magic got credit for being big in this regard, because it is easier to see contact against bigger people because they're moving people first, right? And then the guy has to fight to get his position back, and it's the physical tug of war is much more visible when you have big guys attacking the rim. With smaller guys, they're a little bit more sleight of hand and quick and trying to sneak a finish in here or there. So I think you could make a legitimate case that Donovan and Darius were penalized for being small tonight. I just don't believe in the idea that, well, we went to the rim, so we should get free throws. No. Show me. And let's they know. They know what they're doing. They want to get better treatment from the officials. Call it out, fine. But if you gave JB and Donovan truth serum tonight, I'm not saying that they would say this game was called the best they've ever seen, but they know that pointing to the box score and saying, look at the free throws, That's not the best argument to make.
Okay, so before we finish the podcast, I think we need to talk about JB. Terry Pluto, great columnist. His post-game column was about Donovan scoring 50, the Cavs losing, obviously, Game 7 in Cleveland. But in his headline, he had coaching was a problem. Do you guys believe that coaching was a problem in tonight's game? Do you believe that JB Bickerstaff was a detriment to the team?
Do you want to go first, Ethan? You want me to go?
You can go, Jimmy, because you already started by talking a little bit about the George Niang thing.
Okay. That's a small thing. I'm confused by why George Niang was on the court tonight. Yes.
I think everybody is.
Big picture though. My JB thought is I'm going to answer your question with a question, which I know is everyone loves that. How do you evaluate how much of players playing poorly is the coach's fault? That's the question we need to answer there. I don't know the answer. That's not a great opinion to give. I think obviously. So okay, here's my dumb guy thought process here. I'm going to answer your question with a question. Then I'm going to say probably some of it, and then probably some of it's their fault too. So yep. Thanks for subscribing to the pod, guys.
That does not help me because that was pretty close to what I was going to say. But I agree. I think the main issue that a lot of people were seeing, and I agree with, is that George Niang didn't really fit on the court tonight. He didn't bring anything on either side of the ball. Obviously, we talk about his 1 3-pointer, but then there's also the instance where you think about who else are you going to put out there? Like Evan Mobley and Tristan Thompson do not really go well together on the court. JB Bickerstaff has not shown to put those two on the court together. So you're saying you're adding, again, the minutes from Marcus Morris Sr., or the minutes from George Niang to Marcus Morris Sr., who is also, like we said earlier, old, but also he wasn't playing well tonight either. So, it's... Do I think
neither was Isaac Okoro either.
Neither was Isaac Okoro, right? And in this season, do I think that the rotations could have been used differently? Sure. But in this playoff game, today in Game 6, you have very few options, especially we talked about Evan Mobley and Tristan Thompson not being able to play productively together for extended periods. Evan Mobley was hurt, like I said earlier. Right. Like, he was playing on one ankle, or an ankle and a half, whatever you want to call it. Like, so to think that J.U. Bickerstaff is getting a lot of backlash, I think it's just boiled over from people's takes from the regular season, and they're not really looking at what happened tonight. And, I mean... And then here comes the takes about Darius Garland should have been sat when he had 3 turnovers. Who else was Donovan Mitchell going to turn to in that fourth quarter?
Here's what happens with coaching. So the biggest critique on JB tonight is that probably
he scored 18 points in the
fourth quarter because he was letting Donovan drive the show too much. He just said, "Donovan, please take us," and Donovan almost did. Darn it, he almost did. But you needed more from those other guys, and it is a coach's job, and by extension, his point guard's job, to make all of these guys feel like they are in rhythm, ready to attack, ready to shoot, and getting opportunities to do these things if they cannot create them for themselves, right? So what would you rather have them do? The extreme opposite of this is what the Warriors do, where Steve Kerr runs this Kumbaya offense where everyone's always moving and always getting touches and everyone always feels involved. And what is the number one critique of Steve Kerr as a coach? Steph Curry needs to be running more pick and roll. So to your point, man. To your point, I find it really interesting because when I was in school here in Ohio and just watching the game and stuff, everybody was always talking about, well, when LeBron was here, he should have done this. When LeBron was here, he should have taken over games. When LeBron was here, he should have done all of these different things
to lead the team rather than passing up the ball for the best shot. Donovan Mitchell did that tonight. Donovan Mitchell said, I want the moment. I'm going to take the moment. I'm going to try my best to lead this team to victory. And it just fell short because he literally had no other help in that final frame. Even when LeBron was here, he had so many different options when it came to, let me just pass to Kyrie. Let me set a screen for Kyrie. Let me get and give him the opportunity to get Kyrie the ball and then get out of the way. Donovan Mitchell couldn't turn to anybody in those situations tonight. But here's my take on JB Bickerstaff. I don't know if getting to the second round is going to help his case for keeping his job. Because we've talked about this before, Chris. There's different levels of success for this team in this organization. Some people say getting past the first round. Great. You've done it for the first time without LeBron James since 1993. Great job. The other, I want to get to the semifinals. I want to get to the finals. I want to get to the NBA finals. Two different thoughts. JB Bickerstaff and the Cavs getting to the second round and performing poorly would not be positive for his job either way. So I'm almost of the thought process of it doesn't matter. Like, because of what happens in this series or what happened in this series. What do you guys think?
Chris, you go.
I think the how and the why matters. I think it's a total evaluation of JB and his resume. And that means the 82 games in the regular season. That means however long it goes in this series against the Magic. If they advance past the Magic, if they get to a second round against Boston, it's everything. And it's how he looks and the decisions that he makes and the lineups and the rotations and whether the Cavs believe that he ultimately is the coach to take them to the next step. That's what it comes down to me. Is he the right guy? And that's everything. That's not just game 6 tonight against the Magic. It's not just the first 2 games against the Magic. It's a total evaluation of everything that he has done since he got here as being the head coach. In saying that, I think there's added importance on the here and now and these kinds of moments and these kinds of pressure-packed games and how quick these decisions come for JB Bickerstaff and the kind of tactician he is in fourth quarter situations, in crunch time, the kind of tactician he is against whatever coach is on the other sideline, because now it's about this organization taking the next step. It's not about being a regular season team anymore. It's not about putting a culture in place. It's not as much, some of this still matters, but it's not as much about player development and how that guy individually progresses under the watch of JB. It's a team that is trying to take the next step as an organization. They did the regular season thing. They did the play-in tournament thing. Now it's about, can we get out of the first round? Can we compete with the other top teams in the Eastern Conference? And maybe the Cavs look at the situation and say, he is our Brett Brown. Thank you so much for getting us through the dark times of this rebuild. Thank you for putting an identity in place. Thank you for putting a foundation in place and a culture in place and all that kind of stuff. But we need a better tactician. We need somebody who's better when it comes to in-game management. We need somebody who's better when it comes to in-game adjustments. We need somebody who's better when it comes to all of the other intricate details of being a coach, right? And I think that, to me, is what the evaluation is. It's whether or not he is good enough for this team to take the next step that it wants to take.
I think it's still complicated though, because I love the Brett Brown reference is great. I was thinking of Kenny Atkinson. Great for a
Hmm.
young team, great at building a culture, but the Nets just traded for KD and Kyrie. I don't know. I don't
Right,
know if you're ready
right.
for that, Kenny Atkinson. Um, and it's coaching like players, it's kind of about fit. Does your coaching style does your strengths match the group strengths, or in coaching circles, does your strengths match the group weaknesses? Do you have what they need right now? And when JB got here, yeah, the Cavs needed a lot. They needed a
Mhm.
foundation, and he was good for that. But is he the guy to like? Is he the guy to help them win a playoff series they wouldn't otherwise win?
Yeah.
I don't know, but and now I'm coming back to the point I just made. But like, if Mike Budenholzer was coaching the Cavs right now, like, is Isaac Okoro playing better? Is George Niang playing better? Like,
Right.
what's the change? And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't. That this is not me saying like JB Bickerstaff should absolutely come back next year.
Hmm.
I just think that it can be two things can be true. The Cavs might need a new coach to take the next step,
Right.
and maybe they're a little less ready to take the next step than they think they are on a broader basis.
Yeah. See, that's the other thing that I found difficult about just game six, the game six evaluation. And that's one of the things that I sort of disagreed with Terry on is that, okay, so you make this running list of all the things that a coach does throughout a 48-minute game. And there are so many decisions that a coach makes throughout a 48-minute game. And there are so many moments that become almost innocuous, right? So if you're starting to look at game six as a whole, like, yeah, you can sit there and you can say that the 18 points in the fourth quarter was not the best look for JB. But like, did he commit those 8 turnovers? Did he give up 5 offensive rebounds? Like those things play into this becoming a loss. And if we go back 20 plus years, would anybody have said like that was a poorly coached game by whoever it was that was the coach of the Cavs when LeBron was in the middle of his heater and like he willed the team to a victory on the road in Detroit? Like nobody talked about the coaching there because the end result was the Cavs getting a victory and LeBron just going supernova in order to do that. Donovan was going supernova. It just wasn't enough against the Magic, in part because the Cavs turned the ball over 8 times. They gave up 5 offensive rebounds. They gave up 30 points in the fourth quarter. They didn't get enough defensive stops. So all I'm saying is like, if the only thing that you're going to focus on is the fourth quarter, that's fine. Like that's a negative mark against JB. If you're going to talk about him playing George Niang and Niang being back in the rotation, I don't know why that happened either. So I think that's a negative mark, right? Like it doesn't make sense that the Cavs played the way that they did in game five, and they decided there was something that they didn't like about Niang, many things that they didn't like about Niang going into game five. And then they won that game without him. And then in the days between, they're like, you know what? Let's go back to him in game six. Like that's a negative mark on JB for sure. The fact that he didn't even try Sam Merrill, I think you can make an argument, is a negative mark on JB. But I like the fact that he didn't go back to Karras. Karras was on a different planet tonight. He was so incredibly ineffective that like every time he made any kind of move to the basket, there were people on media row like, what is this dude doing? Like any kind of impact from Karis LeVert would be like really, really helpful to this team. But it didn't happen tonight in the first half. And it took guts, right, for JB to say, this is one of my most important players. He has been throughout the course of the regular season. He's been an anchor and a stabilizing force of the second unit. I'm going to go away from him. Like, if they win the game, if the end result is a winning game, I think people are going to praise JB for that kind of move. So all I'm saying is, like, you have to take the totality of everything that happened throughout the course of this game. And yeah, you can point out the negatives, and I think those are entirely fair. But you also can look at some of the positives and some of the moves that he made, and you can say, hey, that put the Cavs in a pretty good position.
Yeah, Karis LeVert got the ball stolen from him by a center in the
I
second
mean,
quarter in the backcourt.
like, it
Maybe
didn't
the
make any sense how
maybe
he
the
was
foul
playing.
police want to chime in there. It was a physical play, but like, dude, what are you doing? I think the coaching people want accountability. They crave accountability. My
Mhm.
team lost. I am mad.
Right,
I need a face for this emotion.
right,
This guy's talking first. He's the guy. He's the head coach. He's the face of our team. He's the spokesperson for this loss. He's the guy that organizes things. He's the problem. It's the same
right.
reason why people blame Kevin Stefanski for every Browns loss, because he mismanaged a timeout situation at the end of the first half, but the quarterback threw 3 interceptions. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to tell you, man. Like, sometimes it's just that way. And I understand that impulse. And I do think that there's some credence to that. Like, this is your thing. This is your project. You're in charge here, sir. You are in charge. And if it's not going well, at the end of the day, that's kind of on you, regardless of the context sometimes, right?
Right.
That's not always fair, but that's how it goes sometimes. Um, but there is more context. There's a lot going on here. And
Also, like, I was having this conversation with a colleague last night at dinner. So we all understand that JB has limitations when it comes to his offensive creativity, right? His X's and O's when it comes to the offensive end of the floor. But like, and that becomes more glaring when a team scores 18 points in the fourth quarter and can barely score 100 points in any game of this series. Um, but we also recognize that he's a defensive-minded coach, right? Do we recognize that? And it's like, it's easier to understand offensive concepts in the NBA. We know high pick and roll. We know Spain pick and roll. We know double drag. We know floppy. We know hammer. We know horns. Like, all these different things, right? I don't think enough people, myself included, understand the intricacies of defense, right? Some of defense is effort. There's no doubt about it. Some of defense is your personnel. But some of defense is scheme, isn't it? It's the principles that you ingrain throughout the entire regular season. Um, it's the minor adjustments that you make. It's the tactics that you use against an opposing team. So if we can sit here and we can talk about the negatives of JB as a coach because of the offense and how it got stagnant in the fourth quarter, like, don't we at some point also have to give him a little bit of credit, if not a lot of credit, for the Cavs being a top 10 defense every single year that he has been the head coach? That's not just because he has Jared Allen. Or it's not just because he has Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together, right? At some point, he's got to get some kind of credit for that, for the schemes that he's implementing, for the tactics that he's willing to use, for the principles that he has put in place. The Cavs tonight had a defensive rating of 103.6. Like, nobody's talking about that. That is elite level defense. An elite level defense is what this team has shown ever since JB was a head coach. That's what they showed last year when he got outcoached by Tom Thibodeau. That was elite level defense. This series against the Magic has been elite level defense. So 3 years in a row, they've been top 10 in defense. In the playoffs, they have been one of the best defensive teams too. Somebody's got to get credit for that, right? So if we're going to knock the coach for the bad offense, I think it's fair to praise the coach for the good defense. Or does that just like go by the wayside? Just assume that everything is effort. Just assume that any coach would get this kind of defense out of the Cavs. Maybe, but I think that's a leap. I think that's a stretch, especially given the things that he has shown throughout the course of his career when it comes to building defenses in the NBA.
100%. I think the further back you go, the more credit he deserves. Because one thing that is true about, and this is a credit to Jamal Mosley too, one thing that has been true about NBA teams since there have been NBA teams, young teams are bad at defense.
Yeah.
pretty much always. And again, it helps to have a defensive unicorn in Evan Mobley.
Right.
It helps to have an elite rim protector in Jared Allen. Although I would say that Jared Allen has taken some strides in several areas since he got to Cleveland. His profile as a player has certainly raised.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is he has more light on him because Donovan Mitchell's on his team, sure. But, like, again, do we want to sauce a little credit to the coach for that one, for developing him a little bit? Or is he just, we only point out when he does the bad things? Isaac Okoro, another good defender. But, like, young player who excelled on the defensive end pretty quickly. I think Chris is making a good point here. Like, you can't just nitpick the stuff that the coach doesn't do well, especially when JB is probably sitting here thinking, like, this is what you brought me here to do, right? Like, you guys were a mess. You couldn't do anything right. Now I've given you an elite defense that you can count on in your sleep, and we're in the playoffs 2 years in a row, and my guys stopped making shots, and I'm terrible now. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I definitely think JB is a scapegoat for Cavs fans and even for potentially after the season comes to a close. But I think what I was getting at is we've talked all season that the Cavs are not being defined by the regular season. They are going to be defined by their playoff success or their playoff failures. And to me, I believe, one, if the Cavs do not pull off Game 7, that there are going to be multiple changes. We talk about upper management, we talk about Jay Bickerstaff, we talk about players getting traded. All of those things can be true. I think that even if the Cavs get to the second round against the Celtics, that it would take a lot for J.D. Bickerstaff to get the credit that he deserves from what he's already accomplished for the entire season and potentially retain his job with the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's my thought on the topic. But
I also think it becomes fascinating because this front office went out this offseason and believes that it addressed a lot of the weaknesses. Now, many of those have not shown up here in this series against the Magic. And is the front office going to look at the situation and say, okay, the guys that we brought in, they were flawed and they weren't good enough in the series against the Magic? Or are they going to look at the situation and say, well, you know what? Like, JB didn't put them in the best position to succeed. JB didn't do enough to make this offense dynamic to maximize the things that they do well. JB didn't do enough to make it easier on Max Strus and George Niang and some of these other guys. Like, that's, to me, going to be a fascinating debate internally. How much of it are the front office members really going to say, these are just flawed individuals that maybe we overpaid because we had clear weaknesses that we needed to address, and free agency was the pathway to doing that? Or are they going to say that coaching in a large part, a better coach would be able to mask those flaws a little bit and highlight those strengths? Because, like, if we're being honest, we're here in Game 6. We're about to go into Game 7 of this playoff series. And this is, what, a 4.5-man rotation at this point? You know what I mean?
I don't know. Yeah, there's, like, I know you're supposed to cut your rotation down in the playoffs, but, like, it's supposed to be because you know exactly who you can play, not know everything about who you can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, Chris made a good point about everybody needs to take a hard look in the mirror here about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Altman, did you do enough last summer?
Right.
Are you doing the best job of identifying 16 game players over 82 game players? The problem with that is, if you're looking in the mirror long enough, eventually you're just staring at yourself. And the order of operations here is it's well documented that a front office's going to blame the coach for misusing the pieces that they gave him before they will say, my bad. My bad. I gave you the wrong pieces. Because when a disappointing playoff exit happens 2 years in a row, somebody got to go. Somebody got to go.
And like you said, Jimmy, I think it's hard to identify what is the coach, what is adjustment versus what is on the players and what is execution. So, for example, what is it, about the 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter, Cavs run really good offense. Isaac Okoro has the ball wide open from 3. Shot's got to go up, right? Instead, he record scratches. What
It's
is
hard to
JB
watch,
supposed
man.
to do about that? Like, he called a good set. It got a wide open 3 for a guy who was on the court in a playoff situation. If he trusts him enough to be on the court in that situation, he's got to take that shot. And he didn't take the shot, and it turned out to be a negative possession. But is that a JB problem? Is that a roster construction problem? Is that an Isaac Okoro problem? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's what becomes tough. 8 turnovers in the fourth quarter. Is that JB? 5 offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter. Is that JB? There are things, no doubt, that are JB. And there are situations where you can look at him and say, all right, he's holding them back in this way, in this way, in this way. Or he did this wrong, or that wrong, or this wrong. You know what I mean? But I don't look at tonight's loss specifically and see a glaring coaching problem that prevented them from winning this game 6. I think it was many other things.
I think probably the best case, if you want to make the case against JB right now, the best case against him is that when you have something over here and something over here, you have this amalgamation of problems. Like, again, you're in charge here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of all of these problems specifically is you, but the fact that they all exist and we haven't fixed them, that would be on you. I think that's the best case that you could make against him right now. The other, I don't want to get us too far off the track right now because we're already going long. The other interesting factor at hand is, like, how does the front office identify all these different, what's coaching, what's not? How does Donovan Mitchell feel about these things? Because if you want him to be in your plans at this juncture, the way things are going, it doesn't look great that he's going to be around for a long time. But, like, he's your superstar, which means he is kind of your partner in making these decisions. So his opinion has to carry weight here too.
I think we understand how Donovan feels, right? I think we're smart enough to understand that. I think we can connect dots. He came from a situation where he had Quinn Snyder. Quinn Snyder is viewed as a very good coach in league circles. Quinn Snyder is viewed as somebody who maximizes the talent around him, somebody who runs good quality offensive stuff, right? X's and O's, tactics. I think if you asked anybody around the NBA, players, coaches, executives, they would say JB Bickerstaff versus Quinn Snyder, advantage Quinn Snyder, right? And that's the situation that Donovan came from. That's the coach that Donovan played for. So I think it's fair to say that he would view the situation as a step back from a coaching perspective, right? If everybody else is going to view it that way, or the majority of people are going to view it that way, then I would think the guy who has firsthand experience in that situation when comparing the two, I think it would stand out to him, right?
Alrighty. I'm going to nip this in the bud right where we're at. We're going to continue this Donovan Mitchell conversation tomorrow as we preview Game 7 in tomorrow's podcast. But for everything that we talked about today, I feel like we got into a lot of different nuances that are important to delve into, especially after Game 6 and what we saw. But that all has to be tied up into a pretty bow. And as we were just talking about David Bickerstaff, I was scrolling to make sure I didn't miss any stats online. And I saw somebody tweet in response to an argument going on about JB Bickerstaff and him putting George Niang back in. And somebody said, at that point, I'd rather him just check himself in. and like I said, I like to end on a lighter note, especially when we get into these deeper topics and give some good takes for you guys, especially an hour long into this podcast. But until next time, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. You can get all this information that we're talking about, live stats, previews. You can also get injury updates through Cavs Insider in Subtext. So to get all of this information, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com /Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.